My name is Marty Dagoberto. I'm the policy director at NOFA Mass and on conference staff here. And so it's a really great pleasure to kick off our 36th annual NOFA Winter Conference. How many people's first time here? All right, love seeing that. Great. That was for demonstrations. It's probably the 10th or so, but yeah. So we're here with the theme of cooperative foodways, building our future together. And yeah, all of our workshops will help to edify your minds and inspire you to help change our food system. And I'm very much looking forward to our presentation here. Let me see what we got here. Before we get our introductions, I want to acknowledge that we are presenting this conference on land that was inhabited by the Nipmuc people prior to European colonization. So as we work to heal the destruction caused by colonization, we appreciate your support, solidarity, and continued learning. So if you don't know, whose lands you are coming from, you can go to native-land.ca and look them up and see how you can connect. Let's see, get that here. We really want to center racial equity in the food system and all that we do here at NOFA Mass. We recognize that our agricultural system itself is built on stolen land and stolen labor, the forced labor and exploitation of stolen Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. So our conference aims to help address this harm and bring equity to the food system. We have a BIPOC caucus and a White Ally caucus this weekend. So at 1 p.m., the BIPOC caucus in the multipurpose room, and the White Ally caucus is in Sheehan Hall. And we have a list of organizations here that we suggest you check out and find ways to support, and happy to connect further on that. It's a few of our sponsors that help make this conference possible. Please do check out our vendors in the exhibit area as well. But it's really make this community of eco-minded companies and initiatives really help to keep this conference going. So please show them some support. And of course, we have the winter conference auction happening. I believe it ends at 5 or 6 p.m. tomorrow. I already got outbid on my 2 items, so I'm gonna have to check that out. But do give that a look. And that's another important way to raise funds for our education initiatives here. Let's see. Oh yeah, don't forget to take the survey. It really helps us to improve the program. Like I said, 36 years in running, and we can always get better. And your input at the close of the conference will really help us to do that. Great. That's our intro slides. And let me just switch over here. And you know what? I failed to get your pronunciation of your name here. So
I gotta make you try it then.
oh boy. Oh boy. Well, here we have Christine. Hold on. Dzujna?
It was Dzujna when my grandparents came over, and I got a little. So now we pronounce it Dzujna.
Dzujna? Where's that name?
Slovak.
So
Yeah.
Oh, very nice. Well, great. Christine is here to speak on laws that regulate small to mid-sized farms, and I heard we have a few folks interested in how we can support small and mid-sized farms and food initiatives. So it's really great to get a handle on that policy framework. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Christine. And yeah, advancing. And you know what? Do you want me to handle that, or you good? You got it? All right, here you go.
I think I should, but if I forget to, somebody will. I guess I'll sit and I get more comfortable. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. So I do have a PowerPoint presentation. There's sort of a necessary evil, I think. Sometimes it can be a little wordy because it's what the organization uses, but I want this to be kind of casual. I will probably talk for about 45 minutes, and then we can have sort of a more open discussion. And I know we have some food safety and food policy people here too, so I think we can really expand the conversation. So I am with an organization. It's a nonprofit, Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund, and we help farmers, cottage food producers, homesteaders, artisan food producers around the country. And I know from the poll that I had sent out earlier, we've got a number of, I think, people interested in that do cottage food, and a couple of farmers. And I think, let's pull up the Hoover app. So home gardener, urban farmer homesteader. So I think we got a wide range of people that are in the audience that we can have a really good conversation. So what we do is, we would say that our mission is to help make sure that food producers have the right to produce the food that they want, and that consumers have the right to purchase the food that they want for their families. So we're all about looking most specifically at food regulations at the federal, state, and local level to help food producers navigate those and figure out what they can produce, what the law says about the food that they want to produce. Do they need certain licenses? We even will look at the zoning regulations to see what's problematic and support them with that. We do go beyond doing that kind of research. We help prepare contracts where necessary. So we'll talk a little bit about things like raw milk herd shares, which is a sort of a solution that a lot of food producers can use, dairy producers can use to get their foods to their milk to their customers. We do a lot of policy work as well. So we do it sort of on two fronts. We will do it by challenging food regulations. So sometimes we've got into litigation at the federal and state level. We have sued departments of ag if we think that they're misinterpreting the laws in a way that prevents food producers from getting their products to market. But we also support legislative efforts. So we will get behind bills across the country that support food freedom expansion and mobilize our member base, go to hearings, write comments, and support those efforts. So that's a little bit about what we do. So to talk a little bit more about how we support our members, this is sort of what a typical member of ours looks like. Small producer with a dozen or so acres, maybe a few animals, producing vegetables, some eggs, some dairy. So this is sort of average what our members look like. And this is, I'm not going to go through all this, but at the federal level, this is sort of a quick down and dirty of some of the things that they would encounter, our typical member. So the farm bill might not apply to them because they're not necessarily producing a commodity or specialty crop. They may be subject to certain wetlands or other similar type of environmental regulations at the federal level. The federal egg rule comes into play. And this is one of those rules where there's a federal level, and then you also have to go down and look at how the states interpret the federal rules and what they allow as far as egg sales. There's a federal pasteurized milk ordinance that this typical farmer would have to look at and make sure that they're in compliance. And then the Food Safety Modernization Act, which really regulates produce and tracing the source of produce to try to combat the foodborne illness outbreaks that occur from time to time. And then, at the bottom, we talk a little bit about the Federal Meat Inspection Act. And so these are all the types of things at the federal level that typical farm producer would face. And then once they satisfy the federal, they've got to go down to the state level and look at what does the state say about dairy and egg and meat inspection and producing either meat from livestock or poultry. And we also, I would say that I typically advise our members before you even look at some of these federal food laws, it's almost better to start with your very hyper local zoning and other ordinances, because these can trip farmers up more than anything else. I mean, you may find that you get in compliance with the food laws, and then your local zoning says that you can't have a farm stand on your property and sell products from your farm stand. So it really means that they've got to pay attention to all these different levels of laws to get their operation up and running. So these are kind of the big categories. I'm gonna go through: meat processing, poultry, dairy, eggs, food freedom laws, cottage food zoning, right to farm, and the Food Safety Modernization Act. So I'm gonna cover those all at kind of high level. I'm gonna sort of talk a little bit about what the federal law says about each of these. And then since we're in Massachusetts, I'll use that as the sort of representative state laws. I can tell you a little bit about what Massachusetts says about each one of these. So we'll start with meat. So, I know some of this people already know, so I'm sorry if it's stuff you already know, but I just want to cover it so that the people who maybe are not as familiar with these laws have a good understanding. So meat cannot be sold unless the animal has been slaughtered and processed at a federal or state inspected facility. So you cannot sell it. If you can go to a federal USDA or state facility, then you can take that meat and pretty much sell it anywhere. If you go to a federal facility, you can actually cross state lines with it. Usually at a state facility, you can't. You're restricted to selling it within the state. So there are two exemptions to the federal rules on this. One is personal use. So if you're raising the animal and you're slaughtering it for consumption in your own home, then you can go ahead and process it on your property. And then there's the custom use, custom slaughter exemption. And this is where we operate a lot with our members. So this exemption says that if you use a custom slaughter or process facility, and these are facilities that don't have inspectors on site 24/7, then you can process the animal on behalf of the owner of the animal and then return their meat to them. So a lot of times what we will do for our members, and states have different rules about whether you need a license to be a custom slaughter, and they might have other rules about whether you actually can slaughter on farm and then take the carcass to a custom facility and have it further processed. So have to look at each state's laws to see what they say about that. But we will prepare for our members who, certainly post-COVID, it's been much more challenging for people to get into the federal and state facilities. A lot of them closed during COVID, so there's fewer of them. And then the ones that are left are just very backed up. And I have members calling us, telling us that they have to wait months, if not over a year or more, to get an appointment to bring their animal into a facility to get it slaughtered. So the custom option is good for them. What it does say is you have to sell the animal to your customer while the animal is live. You can't slaughter and then sell. You have to sell the animal first. So sell, whether it's portion, like the hind back quarter of the animal. So you would need to write up a bill of sale. And then if you're holding on to the animal for any length of time, boarding it, maintaining it, feeding it before it goes to slaughter for like a year or so, then we would also do what's called a boarding agreement. So it's a set of agreements that we draft up for our members that basically allows them to go to their customer, have a bill of sale where they create that sale, they buy into a portion of the animal, and then they're paying a monthly boarding fee for the farmer to maintain the animal until it's time for slaughter. So that's sort of one option for people that are really challenged by these regulations and the inability to get into these inspected facilities. In Massachusetts, a custom license from the Department of Health is required for someone to operate as a custom processor. And as I said before, you have to sell the animal while it's live. So sales can't occur after. On the poultry side, so at the federal level, there are two exemptions from inspection that small producers can operate under. So there's a 1,000 bird exemption and a 20,000 bird exemption. And that just means you can, if you're that producer, there's usually slightly different requirements between each exemption. Generally, the 1,000 bird level might not require a license or a registration, but the 20,000 would. But it allows a producer to raise up to that level of, oh, bummer. Should I just keep telling you? You wanna? Okay. So it would allow producers to raise and slaughter those birds on their property and then sell direct to consumers, and in a lot of cases also to restaurants and hotels. It just can't go into the retail space, it can't go into stores to go to the general public. And then states all have the option of whether they will adopt one of these exemptions, both of them, or not adopt them at all and require all poultry producers to go to an inspected facility. In Massachusetts, They have adopted both the 1,000 and the 20,000 bird exemption. They do require that producers get a license from the state. They also allow open air slaughter, which can really be really important for people. Some states don't allow that. They want you to have a brick and mortar facility or some sort of enclosed facility to process your birds on your property. But in Massachusetts, open air slaughter is allowed. Whole carcasses can be sold, but you can't sell the birds by the cut in Massachusetts, which is a little, I think other states are a little more liberal than that. But you can sell to consumers, restaurants, and hotels, just not again to the retail space. So that's what poultry, Massachusetts says about poultry. When it comes to eggs for small producers, generally at the federal level, you can sell eggs if you have 3,000 or fewer laying hens. And then there's going to be some labeling and other requirements. And then again, once states follow that basic federal level, you can, states will sometimes add on their own restrictions. In Massachusetts, you can sell eggs from backyard flocks, as long as you test for salmonella and follow certain safe handling and other practices regarding temperature control. And there's certain labeling requirements as well. What you have to put on your cartons is usually it's, your name and address, some way to be able to trace and come back to you if there was some sort of illness or problem with the product. So that's eggs. Dairy, that we work a lot in the dairy space. At the federal level, there's the pasteurized milk ordinance, which is a model law. So states can choose to adopt it or not, adopt certain parts of it. It generally prevents any sales of raw milk across state lines. So you have to stay within the state. And so then states have all sorts of different variations on this. Some states allow raw milk sales direct from the farm. They may require a license. Some states don't require that license. Other states will say that you can actually go off farm with some of your sales, not in the retail space, but maybe farmers markets or roadside stands, you can sell it. And then when it comes to herd shares, which I mentioned briefly before, they're all over the place. Some states will specifically prohibit the use of herd share agreements. Other states, and this means in their law, they actually in statute will allow these agreements. So they're legal. Other states in their statutes, they actually prohibit them. So you can't do herd shares. And then there's a whole category of states that are silent as to the use of herd shares. So they don't say, sorry, did you have a question?
Well,
Marty?
it says, I don't know if you guys, it says not allowed to register. So we can have registered herd shares in Massachusetts?
So in Massachusetts, on-farm sales are allowed with state registration and inspection, but off-farm are not. So there's some level of on-farm sales that are allowed with inspection. So, some states will allow this with a permit. Getting a permit or getting registration can be kind of onerous because they will make you jump through some hoops. You'll generally have to spend some money getting your facilities up to speed in the way that they want it to be, buying whatever equipment in order to produce it that way. So some states that allow it but require registration or permitting, our producers members still don't want to go through that because it invites regular inspections. It means you have to put an investment in to bring your operations up to speed. So if we can, we will still offer herd shares, even in states where they might allow it, but they require registration. So in Massachusetts, I guess there is a Department of Ag opinion that herd shares are a sale and not allowed unless you obtain a certificate of registration from the state. So that just makes Massachusetts a little bit trickier than most states. So I think in that situation would not prepare a herd share for somebody unless they got registered. But in states where they're silent completely as to herd shares, we prepare them for our members. And again, it's agreement like the meat herd share or the meat share I talked about before, where you would have your customer buy into the herd. They become a small partial owner. We do a bill of sale. Money has to exchange hands to make it like a true purchase, but they become a part owner. And then there's a boarding agreement that says they agree you're going to raise, house, maintain their animal, care for it, milk it, and you'll come and pick up the milk at regular intervals. And then it's not a sale of milk in the way that the law prohibits. It's a distribution to the rightful part owner of the animal. So we prepare agreements for our members, and we have been challenged in some states, and we push back, and we so far generally have been successful in fighting those. I mean, I will say that there have been recent efforts in recent years in Massachusetts to pass a bill allowing for delivery of raw milk direct to customers as long as the sale has taken place prior to delivery. So, you know, I don't, in this current legislative session, I haven't seen a bill come up yet, but it still may. And I would just say anybody who's interested, keep an eye out for that and definitely get behind it and support it. There's been more activity across the country and states pushing for these kind of bills. So, and we've seen them successfully get passed. So I think there's hope there. And I'm just going to cover a little bit, you know, we're all about food freedom and expanding food freedom. So just some examples in other parts of the country where we're seeing positive, exciting movement in the right direction. You know, Wyoming has a fairly new Food Freedom Act, which allows homemade food. So cottage food makers, people who want to prepare products from their home kitchens and sell them, can be sold directly to the consumer without licensing or regulation. I mean, this is kind of huge. In the cottage food area, for anybody who does this, there can be a lot of restrictions and a lot of food lists to navigate, which foods are allowed, which ones are not. So to have this be sort of wide open in this state is kind of huge. And it sort of acknowledges, I think, that, you know, the consumers are consenting adults who have done their homework and they know that there may be some risks, probably not greater than with big ag, in buying food from those produced in home kitchens, but they've made that decision and they've educated themselves. And so it acknowledges that they know how to make those choices for themselves without making people jump through all these hoops. They have a meat share amendment. So it's one of the few states that actually in their law says you can do these meat share agreements that I was talking about before, because in other states it's unsettled about whether they would be challenged or not, but they have made them legal. So, and what's good about this particular one is they allow cuts of meat to be sold. So where before I said portions of an animal generally can be sold in some states, you got to take that portion regardless of what cuts are included. But here it's allowing you to pick and choose the kind of cuts that really you want and not just take that portion that is designated to you. Other examples in Utah, same thing. They have opened up some of their homemade food sales to make it a little bit easier to get access to that. Montana also has done the same thing, but with poultry, they're allowing some processing of birds without licensing and registration up to 1,000 animals. And even a small dairy is permitted to sell, produce and sell raw milk in the state. Which is a lot of, again, really positive movement in the right direction. This is just talking about some other recent meat legislation that allows animal shares under law, and interest in at least, in Colorado, of at least 1% of a live animal instead of a whole, half, or quarters. And Nebraska also has recently passed a bill that allows these animal share agreements under law. So they're now legal. We don't have to like worry about our members in that state being challenged if they don't want to do those kinds of agreements. Maine is interesting because, and we're seeing a little bit more movement in other states, but they have actually adjusted their constitution to make access to food an inherent right. So it's important because it allows laws to be passed, food freedom laws to be more easily passed once you make a state constitutional amendment like this. And it allows local governments across the state to broadly exempt food producers that are engaged in direct to consumer sales from additional regulations. So again, acknowledging that these are consenting to adults who have done their homework, know their food source, and want to go direct to the farm, and it's giving them the access to do that without imposing a lot of additional regulations. So really, really important movement in the right direction. Cottage food regulations, again, for anyone who's involved in this area, it can be tricky. Every state has its own regulations. They usually will divide the foods that are allowed into two categories, things that are potentially hazardous, and they're generally things that would need to be refrigerated, have certain acidity levels that could cause food bacteria. So they're really much broken down into, generally, I would say baked goods are okay. Anything you make from your home that's like breads, cupcakes, etc. If you put dairy into your bread, as like, cheese, or if you put meat, some people make breads with meats included in them, those can be problematic. Baked goods that require refrigeration, so pies that will have, custards or creams, can be generally not allowed. So it really requires people to do their homework on what products you want to prepare. Some states will have a very detailed list. This is what it's allowed, this is what's not allowed. Other states leave a little bit more up to interpretation and makes it a little bit harder to figure out what you can do. And then there might be some requirements on where you can sell, who you can sell directly to. Do you have to get certain labelings on your products? I do, most states will allow you to even do some of the unsafe things, but you're gonna have to get probably a bigger license, get a commercial kitchen potentially built on your property. It probably won't be able to be made in your home kitchen where you cook for your family, but you might have to build a separate kitchen that's fully compliant with the regulations before you can go to the next level and make all these other foods that are generally deemed unsafe. Yeah, go ahead.
Question.
Sure.
And it's a little specific, so maybe, I don't know, you can let me know if we should save it for later, but I'm a
Okay.
bread baker.
Okay.
And I was interested this year in like starting very small, just like making sure my I's were dotted, T's were crossed to sell bread. And I live in Chelsea now. And so I had learned about the retail residential kitchen. And at the local level, I was told that my street, my neighborhood is zoned so that I'm not eligible for that license. And I just was curious, like, does that check out? I tried to explain to the inspector, this was like at City Hall. I just was trying to get a sense if that's really true, not to be like cynical and doubt the official. I would never do that. But especially because it's bread,
I
it's
kind of
baking
do.
at 500 degrees.
Yeah.
Which,
And it's just spread with no additional, like, well, what sounds odd to me about that is, I would think that you would be potentially zoned in a place that might not allow you to sell it from your property, but you should still be allowed to make it. I've not heard that zoning would prevent you from actually getting that license, but that does seem a little strange to me. Do you know what zone you're in? I mean, if you're in agricultural zone, there's a lot more liberality generally. Other zones, they start adding on all sorts of restrictions.
But what you're saying makes sense that it could be because the language they used was something to do with like low density residential neighborhood. And so they might have been perceiving what I was saying, like I was going to be having loads of people showing up.
Yeah, and that can usually be a problem, but it's more about fixing the zoning part related to having, cars parked or people coming on at all hours, which maybe they wouldn't like, but it shouldn't prevent the kitchen. I have not seen that.
All right, well, that's very good.
And that's something, I mean, that's extremely directly in our wheelhouse. So if you want to come talk to me at the Venner Center later and you're interested in joining up, we can do that research for you. And even if we think their interpretation is wrong, we would write them a letter, push back and say, you're wrong. And we've done that enough and we get people to back down because, sometimes they are wrong. They're either stretched thin, they get conflicting opinions within the office that don't always come together. Sometimes they're just not well versed in the law. So it may just be that they need to be kind of educated. Like if we say this is our interpretation, you need to give us the exact rule or regulation that says otherwise. They might not be able to point to it. And then we would have a way to have a dialogue with them and figure out, well, what do you need to do to come into compliance? Do you need to ask for a variance, which you can do? It may not be that hard to do, saying I need an exception from that rule for this reason. And they may come back and say, we'll give you it with these restrictions. You have to build a parking area, off to the side that's not going to interfere with your neighbors, and it can only have 5 spots, and you have to restrict yourself to these hours. You know, it might be something like that. So I don't think it's a dead end. I think you should definitely consider exploring and pushing back a little bit more. But I did want to say, I mean, I think you pretty much addressed that, but in Massachusetts, I checked the law. So anyone making food that they sell direct to the consumer, which think is defined as farmers markets, events, internet, or mail, is considered to be a residential retail kitchen and must obtain a permit. So that's exactly what you're talking about. And you could only make foods that could be safely held at room temperature, baked goods, jams, jellies. So the other things that would require cold handling, you probably could go the next level and get what they call a wholesale wholesale residential kitchen permit to go make those products and maybe even sell them to stores and restaurants. But that's going to probably be a lot more investment as far as money to get up to that level of that kind of kitchen that you would need. But for what you're doing, I would love to look into that because I think they're probably wrong.
I'll definitely.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry for taking such time for such a specific.
No, I think it's okay. I mean, I'm fine with answering questions as we go, so we don't need to hold to the Q&A at the end. If you guys are fine with that, I'm fine with that. Did you have a question? Oh, okay, great. Excellent. I love when that happens. I anticipated your need. Yes.
I'm curious, in the category of direct to consumer, would a delivery service put that into a different category? If it was something that you're like, you know, you have like an online marketplace, it's direct, the transaction is direct to consumer, but then there's some sort of knowledge.
It's again, it depends. With each product, it depends. Like I've seen the raw milk laws that will say things like on farm only. So they're clearly saying we don't want you to deliver or have drop off points. So where we get explicit direction from the state that they have a problem with delivery, then we generally tell our members you should follow that because you're going to get into trouble, or you could try it and they may slap your wrist and then you stop.
What
So
does it usually look like?
for, I think it would depend on the product. So you're talking about cottage food or you're talking about raw milk or, yeah, I would guess I would have to look at that specifically. In the cottage food area, I don't see delivery addressed a lot in the law, which means it's probably okay. Sometimes they might say you can't sell at farmers markets. They will get explicit. So, but if they don't say anywhere else, then we might say to you, especially if you were a member of ours, do it. Maybe we can prepare like a delivery agreement, which will give it a little bit more protection. And then if you hear from the state and they push back, we can jump in, like I said, and write a letter and say, well, why are you saying this? What rule prevents it? And see if they can't come up with it, then maybe they'll back down. So we'd have to look at the specific, the rules in your state and see if they give us any prohibition, and if they don't, we're willing to tell our members to just try it and give you a way to push back and test the waters. I mean, you know, everybody has a different risk for tolerance for risk. So some of our members like, I want to know exactly what the rule says and I want to follow it to a T, and others say I'm willing to try and test the waters or even push really hard to try and get the rules changed. So we always ask our members too, before we're going to tell you what to do or what we think is okay, what's your risk tolerance and how much do you want to push the envelope a little bit? And you know, I generally do tell our members, I've been with the organization. So by the way, I'm not a lawyer, just so everybody knows, I should have said it in the beginning. I'm a paralegal by training. But I do advise our members. I've been with the organization about a little over 3 years. I have really never seen a Department of Ag or a Department of Health come out of the gate with a fine. They will generally like come, inspect, see, tell you they have a problem, hopefully put something in writing. You should always ask them to put something in writing, not just tell you they have a problem. They should be citing which law and regulation they have a problem with, because then we can, you know, especially if you're a member of ours, we can look it up and tell you whether we think they're right in their interpretation. But I don't think they fine right out of the gate. They will come tell you what they have a problem with. They will ask you to stop. So you will stop. If you keep going, then they might fine you because now they've already warned you. So I guess what I'm saying is I think it seems to be generally okay to push the envelope a little bit. Let them tell you it's wrong. If there's no law prohibiting it, try it. If they tell you it's wrong, you can stop. Or we can put up a fight and see if we can get clarification or a change made. But I'm happy to, you know, would be happy to look into that a little bit more to get a direct, clear answer on that specific issue. I see that there might be some questions in the chat, but I'm gonna hold a little bit just to go through some of these and then come back to that, if that's okay.
There are no, those are links that I put in.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. So I'm not gonna go through all this and read it, but it's just to kind of illustrate that in the cottage food area, in the last few years, there have been some changes in the laws in positive ways. So, things like Florida, I thought was really interesting because they had a 50,000 a year revenue limit that they just increased to 250,000. I mean, that's like a huge drop. I mean, a huge increase. So things like that are really good to see because a lot of the revenue levels, they would put a cap for cottage food makers and it would be kind of ridiculously low. So we're seeing a lot of this. And I just did a analysis for all 50 states of various bills that are coming up that we're gonna monitor. And I saw a lot of pretty good cottage food laws being proposed that are going to make some of this a little bit easier across the country. I mean, again, I know we're Massachusetts based. I don't think I saw a Massachusetts based cottage food law on the table, but doesn't mean there's not going to be one coming up soon. I won't spend a lot of time on urban ag. I mean, there's, I think urban ag has a lot of the same issues related to zoning and ordinances, things that might restrict your ability to put a garden in your front yard because it may change the aesthetics of the neighborhood. Rooftop gardens can sometimes be regulated in the ordinances. You will get fencing regulations. You might have to deal with setbacks for different structures or where you put your animal pens. So these are all when you get into a more urban setting, these are the kinds of things you're going to have to look at and see what is allowed in your particular municipality. Odor, noise, litter, those are a lot of, big ones too. How much, especially if you have pigs or something like that, like how many odors are coming from the farm that are really not allowed to impact your neighbors. There might be restrictions on that. I'll talk a little bit about state right to farm laws. So every state has a right to farm law, which is helpful. And we've used it in a lot of cases with our members. And what these do is they seek to protect farmers from nuisance claims and lawsuits. So if you have a neighbor that's saying there's too many noises coming from your animals, there's too many smells, if you have a livestock guard dog who's out there doing his job and he's barking a lot, people complain about that all the time. And I think especially in COVID, the numbers of these kinds of complaints really went up because people are home more and their tolerance for these kinds of nuisances became really low. But the state right to farm laws say that if you're engaged in farming practices, you're really protected from those kinds of claims. Some of these, the odors, the noises, they're inherent to farming. There's nothing you as a farmer can do about it. So these laws seek to protect you from those claims. So, generally neighbors should not be successful in pushing those claims because you're engaged in, as long as you're following good agricultural practices and, not doing anything that's negligent, then you should be protected. So it's something that we do use a lot to help defend our members against those kinds of claims. And for some reason, like I said, we've seen a lot of livestock guard dog issues, people complaining that the dogs are barking or even just that they're outside and people think they're being, the farmers are being cruel by keeping them outside in pens. But I mean, these dogs have been around for, centuries and that's their job. And their job is to bark when predators come near. So it's really hard for people to navigate those kinds of claims. But, we have been successful in a number of cases in pushing back. We go to hearings if we have to for our members and help defend against those claims. We talked a little bit about the Food Safety Modernization Act, which has been going into effect in the last couple of years. And I think this, a lot of food producers really do have to look at this because most people do produce, and produce is a big part of it, although there are rules for certain other products like cheeses, nut butters, eggs, fish, ready to eat foods like deli salads. So the whole goal of this is to have a rapid and effective method for tracing food back to its source. So there'll be reporting requirements, keeping track of what you're growing, where it's being sold. There are exemptions that I've listed here. Generally, food grown for personal use does not fall under the law. If you sell 25,000 or less a year, you're exempted. I mean, that's generally a low number for some people, so it's not that helpful. Egg producers with less than 3,000 hens, and some nonprofit establishments like soup kitchens. There are some other exemptions as well that may apply to anyone here who's producing food. For example, some foods that are rarely consumed raw, like asparagus, you would almost always cook it. So you're gonna deal with any bacteria or potential foodborne illness, and a lot of those will be exempted as well. But it's become kind of an issue in the last few years. Like I said, there's been a rolling series of effective dates where certain rules keep coming into effect under this massive legislation. So it is something to look at depending on what it is you're going to produce. And I would just talk a little bit about expanding farmer rights. So this is, again, this is kind of a summary of things I've been talking about. What we do, we draft these agreements for our members that help them get to their products to market. We do a lot of very proactive research. So I already talked to a couple of people today who are planning certain operations and things that they want to grow. So before you get started, we can do a lot of the research for you on what does the state, so if you wanted to do raw milk products like butter, what are the federal rules? What does your state say? And then do you have any other problems with your local zoning or ordinances that would prevent you from going forward, and let you know what the state of play is. This is what you can do. What do you need a license for? What is that going to look like? How onerous? What are the fees? And just give you a sense of how to plan for your future and set goals for your operations. And then we assist producers facing inspections. So we do have a 24/7 hotline. So if an inspector shows up unannounced, we have farmers that will call us. They're here, they want to do this, they're asking me this, what can I block them from? I don't want them here. And we'll try to get involved as it's happening and walk them through that. You know, generally tell people, tell them it's not a good time for you and you'd like to set an appointment. What do they really want to look at? What are they interested in? And then when they come back, you'll be a little bit better prepared to address whatever concerns they're raising. And then just a little bit about the fact that we do I talked about this, a lot of policy work, and try to help push legislation around the country that will expand food freedom rights. So at the federal level, we've been fighting a butter petition because there was an attempt to ban, there's a ban on the selling of raw butter across state lines. And so we partnered with a member of ours and mounted a federal challenge on that. Unfortunately, we've lost a couple of rounds. The Court of Appeals in June rejected our challenge. So the ban of the sales across state lines remains in place, but I think we're continuing to think about appealing that. And this whole underpinning of this particular case is that Congress held the authority to regulate butter. I mean, historically, it's just such an important product that they kept that authority for themselves, but the FDA jumped in and implemented this ban. So that was the basis of our lawsuit, that the FDA didn't really have the authority. Congress alone had the authority to implement that kind of a ban. So that's what we're fighting, that the FDA doesn't have that authority to do it. So we're going to keep up that fight. I will say I did take a quick look, and Marty may have more to add on this, but I know that in Massachusetts, there are potentially some bills coming this year on pesticide reform. I saw that there was maybe a task force that was being sought under one bill, another bill to promote ecological mosquito control, and some others. I think that might help some farmers. So I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that about.
Thank you, Christine. And I was actually realizing that we're in coalition with you guys, Nova Mass and the Farm Consumer Legal Defense Fund on the cottage food legislation.
Yeah.
Which
There is one in session now.
I don't know if it's been refiled. I was actually,
Okay.
I mean, filing deadline is 20th, but that was Rep Boldiga and Oliveira put in a bill to make it so that your home kitchen products can be sold commercially. Um,
Oh, great.
and let's see, I forget who the lead advocate's on. I'm pretty sure it's the Sustainable Business Network and the buy locals that have been pushing that. But you can find the details on the bill from last session on our page, nofamass.org/policy. And we'll have the updated information when that is refiled. But we should
Yeah.
connect on that. And then on the raw milk front, the Senator Ann Goby,
Yeah.
she is refiling a bill that would allow delivery of raw milk in Massachusetts.
Oh,
Right now,
great.
It's only on farm sales. And we've been hoping, with previous administration, the DPH was pretty anti raw milk.
Yep.
And we'll see if anything changes with the new administration to be determined. But you can also check out the marawmilk.org is our mass raw milk network, where we list raw milk farms who want to be listed, where you can buy directly there.
Oh, that's great. That's good to know. I'll definitely keep a track of those. And I know there's some later today. I think there's a whole farm bill session.
Tomorrow, I think.
Yeah. Oh, is it tomorrow?
Yep.
And I know that there's a push to make this year's, so this comes up every couple of years, to make it a climate bill. So hopefully there'll be a lot more funding and resources and research for farmers that are really being affected by all the climate change challenges. So definitely keep an eye out for that. More work to be done. I mean, on the policy side, we're constantly looking for opportunities to get behind, I said this before, get behind bills, mobilize our member base, submit our own federal comments. As a national organization, we assist local grassroots groups on policy issues they're pursuing. So I would just say, keep an eye out for those things. Marty was mentioning stuff that's coming up, cottage food. If that's something you're very involved in, you really can have a really important role to play. Call your legislators, make sure it's known they really do listen to that stuff. So the more numbers, the more people can get to call, submit comments. Maybe it'll be an opportunity for you to even show up at a hearing and talk about what you do, what you're trying to do, and how a negative bill would affect your operations. They can be really effective. I think if they're making decisions in a vacuum and they don't hear from the people these laws are affecting, it's very easy for them to just push through.
And if I could say,
Yeah.
This cottage food bill is not one of our top priorities as far as where we have. I'm on 20 hours a week as a policy director, and we have those pesticide bills that are our top priority. If anyone in this room is particularly interested in helping to drive NOFA support of the cottage food bill, I'd love to have you on our policy committee. It's open to all members, and that can be something that you can focus on, and I can work in tandem with you, to leverage our resources there. Similarly with the raw milk, is something that we can support. And it's, we only have so many hours in the week, some capacity. So either of those bills interest you and you want to get oriented on how to really dig in on policy, I'm happy to get you oriented and plug you in.
Yeah, and I'll just talk a few examples. We had a member last year in Iowa who helped push. I don't think they actually got the bill successfully through last year, but they keep bringing it up every year. And sometimes that happens. You just have to keep going back to the drawing board every year. But she's gotten very involved in the effort to push this raw milk bill through. And it just started really simply. I think she was at a county fair, introduced herself to her local senator, talked a little bit about what she did. They ran into each other again a couple months later at a parade, and he came right up to her and said, I'm thinking about a raw milk bill. Would you get involved in this? And she did. And she's led the effort and really mobilized a lot of people. So it does really have results. We also had another member in Mississippi. We prepared a raw milk herd share for her. So she implemented these sets of documents. She started distributing milk to her customers. And the Department of Health came by and gave her a hard time and said, you're not allowed to do this. Raw milk sales are illegal, and told her she had to stop. So she came to us. There's nothing in the law that said raw milk herd shares were illegal. And so we kept pushing back and you haven't cited a statute. Where does it say that? In the meantime, she started talking to her commissioner of agriculture, who happened to live down the street and was a farmer himself. And he got directly involved and said, no, I totally believe in this. You should be able to do this. I've told the Department of Health before they're wrong. He wrote a letter to them, told them to back down. She's operating again. I mean, that was like really easy, kind of simple one, because you didn't have to go through months and months and months of pushing through a legislation, but she got the Department of Ag commissioner to just get the state to back right down. And so these things really do work. And I was very impressed to see that that got done without too much headache. So that's the meat and bones of my presentation. I'm happy to continue talking and address any other specific questions you have. So what do you guys want to talk about? Yeah.
Just wanted to be right with Mario's saying, so I worked with the same Sustainable Business Network, we were leading that last year. Don't remember the status is, because one of our board members was pushing that for that.
It's the cottage food one, you mean?
Yes,
Yeah.
so if folks want to chat that, get in touch with me afterwards, and I can try to connect you to resources as well, on where that, the status of,
We can get it filed again, right?
yeah, yeah.
Well, and again, I mean, keep us in mind, because wherever you need support, whether you need people to submit comments, call their legislators, we can do action alerts, mobilize the base. If you need a lot of local people to come out to any hearings, you can find members who can do that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I'm sure you can find people too, but if you need more support, or you need us to write letters from our organization and other organizations, we could do that.
So I wanted to ask about with the kitchens that people are using, right? So I have people in my kitchen we have like a community kitchen at the
Okay.
nonprofit I work at. So people come in and they do like cut vegetables or they freeze vegetables. Where does that fall under for like cottage foods?
Yeah.
We usually sell them at like farmers market or like sell them back to us as a CSA.
Yeah, I mean, some, you're doing it for the community as like a
Yeah, so it's like we have a lot of farmers.
charitable food service kind of a
Essentially,
thing.
It's like we have farmers who work at our nonprofit.
Yeah.
They farm the land that we own, but they're like their own producer. And so they come and they want to like sell more products. So by way of that, we have a like commercial kitchen
Yeah.
that they come and they use to like cut up their own vegetables, freeze them, sell them. So I'm wondering where that falls into, because now this year we have to update the kitchen guidelines and the uses for it.
Yeah.
So to do that, I just want to make sure, like you were saying before, dotting all the i's and like getting everything completely right.
Well, it sounds like, if I heard you right, you have a licensed commercial kitchen.
Yeah, it just means to this year has an update. and
Yeah.
The person is very like nitpicky
Yeah.
about getting everything together and like all the right SOPs,
Right.
making sure it looks perfect. So I had a question about that with the vegetables, where those fall into it. And then also people have been wanting to do canned goods, like
Yeah.
canned ginger, canned garlic.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that is also a cottage good or where that falls under.
Yeah, some of the canned stuff, because of the acidity levels, like they have all these formulas sometimes about what acidity levels the product is at and whether that's deemed safe. And in some states, they might have you let them test it so that they proactively know, and then they can can bless it for you or say the acidity levels are not safe enough and
Right.
maybe you have to reformulate or something. But if you have a licensed commercial kitchen, you probably have already gone through everything that the state requires to get up to all the safety rules that they have. And then they'll usually come out periodically, inspect to make sure you're still up to speed. So you're probably okay, but we can always take a deeper look for you if there's any question about what the rule says.
That's like the next step for us, is we want
Yeah.
to get re-inspected. I think I just came into the project like a month ago. So, and then my responsibility is the kitchen. And it sounds like we're just coming into getting another inspection and like,
Okay.
re-upping all of our the SOPs and making sure everything looks good. But like,
But I guess a good question is, if you get a report that says you're deficient or there's problems, there might be a way for us to help you figure out whether they're, again, interpreting the rules correctly.
Right.
I mean, it's a little bit different. I guess I would say once you get into licensing, there's a little less room to push back, because obviously they're following very strict protocols and they're probably correct. I mean, there's probably not going to be a heck of a lot to push back on, but if it was anything more serious and you felt like they were really potentially misinterpreting or going too far, we could double check everything and make sure, you don't
Yeah.
want them to start shutting down parts of your operations, right? So,
so
did you have a question or comment?
I was gonna add, so like any certified food drink is better, something called by water activity, and then send certain products, unless you have the facility, we'll send out for a scheduled process for that product. And be the last step to get that.
you send that out to the lab, or like a representative.
Yep, you'll just get, like Cornell has a great one, I think Maine has stuff too.
Great, thank you.
Well,
Any other questions or things I can address?
I had a question.
Yep.
Value added sales at farm stand, like licensing of the actual farm stand to retail and things like that. What kind of restrictions are there? And then do you do any work with farmers brewers licenses?
I have not yet done farmer brewers licenses, but I imagine we could do that. I mean, obviously, we're expanding a little bit more as different products crop up, so I think that would be something we could definitely research for you, but to date, I have not done that. And on the first question, again, I think it depends. I would want to know where you are and look at the local zoning rules and probably the local Department of Health rules that govern, you know, can you have a farm stand on your property or near your property? What are, you know, what are you zoned for? What is it
I'm
allowed?
actually, so I'm on town land that I rent. We have a farm stand for the farmers that are there. There's 4 of us that kind of
Okay,
up. And so we have in Massachusetts on Nantucket. So we have an existing farm stand. I'm just curious how far I can go in sales at that location.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. That's kind of sometimes a hyper local focused rules. I'd have to do the research specifically on what they say in your area. You know, which we can do, but I would need to look at what those regulations say and then give you guidance from there.
So I'll reach out.
Yeah, please do. Was this helpful? I mean, does this cover, go ahead, you had a question?
I just had a question about what is membership in your organization entail?
Yeah, so we have different levels. We have consumer level, which is like $50 a year. Homesteader, I think, is 75, and then for farmers, which is the bulk of our membership, it's $125 a year. And that's 2 hours of consultation in the first 6 months and then unlimited after that. So we have members that have been with us for years and they just come back repeatedly over and over again. So I mean, that's a fraction, I think, of what most lawyers charge, but yeah, or if you went out to hire somebody directly. So I mean, it includes doing all this research proactively for you on what your goals are and what you want to grow. Or, you know, even if you're in operations and you're not sure about, you know, expanding in a certain direction, we can do research into laws for you. It includes any of these documents that we might prepare for you. So if you actually wanted a herd share agreement for raw milk or meat share, membership fee includes all that creation and sign off. And then if you get, you know, if you hear from a local inspector and you need us to jump in and make some phone calls, maybe write a letter, that's generally inspected. The only time costs might go up is if it actually turns into a much bigger challenge and there might be a citation issued and then a court date or hearing, and if it potentially went to litigation, then we would have to just review the matter with our board and see what we could do. It's generally a cost sharing arrangement after that. We wouldn't tell you have to foot the whole bill, but we're a nonprofit, so we only have limited funds. So we would do some cost sharing. And most of the lawyers that we partner with, so the lawyers on staff aren't licensed to practice in every state. So we don't have 50 lawyers, but we partner with lawyers in every state. And they generally will do work for us at a pro bono, completely free, or low bono rate. So we can usually get discounted rates. So if it did escalate to litigation, they might be able to help at a lower rate, and then we would talk about cost share. But again, that's usually once it escalates. But before that, there's plenty of services we offer at the $125 a year that would be included.
We have a question from Liz in the
Yeah.
from Zoom here. Liz?
Hi, yeah, I just live in Eastern Mass and I live on a wooded acre. So I've been looking into growing mushrooms on my property. And I wanted to know if it kind of went beyond family use and I decided to sell at a farmer's market, if there's any barriers to entry or if that $25,000 cap keeps me from having to do anything like heavily regulated.
Yeah, so I do think that the FSMA would probably keep you at that 25,000 cap. But But I could, I could look into it because there are other exemptions that I'd have to see. And yeah, I'd have to see what I was gonna say. It doesn't really necessarily even fall under the raw food exemption because you can eat, a lot of people eat mushrooms raw, so.
Right.
Yeah, sorry.
Should not eat mushrooms raw.
I have a thought or a question, I guess, like if you're growing mushrooms on your own property, are you like buying these substrate blocks to grow from? And if so, is like the due diligence being done on the front end of the people producing the substrate blocks? Like that might be something, maybe it's like a both and kind of situation. but-
Yeah, sorry, Liz, if I don't have a better answer for you right now. I think I would have to dive a little bit deeper into the rules to see. And again, FSMA does have lists of products and produce, so I'd want to be sure where mushrooms land and what your abilities are. So you think you would do above 25,000 a year in sales?
Not this year. Yeah, I'm just sort of
Yeah.
kind of like looking into it and are there major barriers? Like if I did, so it sounds like if I did the first year and it was like not that much money, it would be okay. But if it went beyond that, it
Well,
would be,
yeah, and again, remember, it's not saying you can't sell them. It's just saying now you're subject to all these additional requirements, which is mostly record keeping.
okay.
So, yeah, I think, yeah, you might find that it's not so onerous, and it's especially if you're making that much more money, it's kind of offsetting the burden. I don't think it's overly burdensome. You would just have to set up some more systems for keeping good records
Okay.
of what you're producing and selling. So I think there's definitely, it's workable, and we can help you figure out what is and what you'd have to do after that 25,000 mark.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure. Trying to think if there's anything else that was important to cover. Anybody else have questions online?
It's only with.
Oh, okay. I mean, we're a little early, so if you guys want to open it up to anything else, or I'll be at the vendor area all day. So if you want to come and talk more specifically about anything, feel free. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you do it, is your work mostly just with farmers, or do you do work with other food producers that are like in terms of good value added things as well?
Yeah, we do some value added stuff as well. Like I said, cottage food, artisan food producers. So we've done a little bit help with wine producers and some people who only produce herbs, some hemp products I've done some research on. So I think you should just ask, right? And we'll see what's in there, but mostly anything you can grow, we can do, we can provide support on that. So definitely come talk to us and we'll figure out what we can support. Yeah.
I want to, 2 minutes say, when you say our organization, you talk about NOFA, or
It's it's a big mouthful. Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund. We're a nonprofit and provide legal support to farmers, food producers, cottage food makers, helping them navigate mostly the food regulations at the federal, state, and local levels, and zoning and ordinance, whatever sort of prevents them from getting their products to market. We're all about food freedom and how can we help you get your products sold and keep producing. And I've even answered questions about having Airbnb type stuff on farming property. So avian flu issues are big right now, so we've helped people with a bunch of those. We've had members who have had their flocks depopulated because there was one bird that tested sick, and so we're running into a lot of those issues, trying to get quarantine shortened, trying to get compensation for that, the fact that their flock was destroyed. So that's another big issue that we're seeing. Hopefully we'll get a little better in 2023, but I don't know what the forecasts are yet for avian flu next year. Yeah.
I'm just gonna
My specific situation, so I manage a farm operation for a residential community for adults with special needs.
Okay,
And so we're involved in not just growing produce, but also some animal processing on the farm. And kind of been considering that the organization is the owner, the consumer
yeah,
of those. There's no sale of those meat items,
right.
you know, from the processing. And wondering where we would be in that sort of regulatory scheme.
Yeah.
Because it's not a meat share, it's not even, if it's, you know.
So how, what mechanism, is there like an association agreement or is there any?
It's nonprofit.
Yeah.
Human services organization, so they have, you know, they're facilitating 7 houses with 30 residents.
Right,
And providing meals all day, so unfortunately, you know, it's coming from our.
you're growing the food that's going into,
Correct.
and then, so how does the meat processing get handled? Is it going out to, and it's, did you say meat processing?
Yeah, we've done some on-farm open air.
Yeah.
Sheep, goats, chickens, and, you know, wrapping up, putting in the freezer and putting them into the houses.
Yeah, I mean, we've had like what we call sort of buying club arrangements where I was reluctant to create more paperwork for people, but where someone's sort of the middleman saying, we're gonna get you all these products, and it sounds like you guys are producing all the food yourself, but some people will say, we're gonna go to a bunch of area farms, have them source all these products, and then the consumers can come to us as the middleman and buy it. But we have generally recommended that you still, where you need to for the meat and the raw milk, if that's something that's part of it, have those agreements in place between the producer and the consumer, just to protect you. I mean, if the inspectors haven't come and raised any issues with you, but again, I'm sure you have a fully
We've been
licensed,
inspected and everything.
fully licensed commercial kitchen. So
Right.
yeah, I think under the fact that you got the fully licensed commercial kitchen, you probably met all the barriers that they need you to meet. I mean, we could always take a look at it to make sure you're not without risk, and that, you know, just make sure that there's nothing that you have to worry about as far as being challenged by any inspectors. But I think the fact that you have a fully licensed commercial kitchen addresses a lot of those needs. But again, we can, because they're probably looking at every single product, have told you what you need to do to come into compliance. And they're continuously coming out, checking all the safety regulations, and so I think you're covered by having all that in place.
Right.
Yeah. But that's, you know, and I did raise a little bit about this buying club arrangement, and we have done those for people if they want to sort of bring everything together in their community and have one source where people can come and buy products, but they want to get the products from different farmers. We have set up those kinds of arrangements as well. You have a question?
I don't know if this is like 100% in your wheelhouse, but we've been wanting to convert the commercial kitchen that we have for our organization into like a community kitchen.
Yeah.
It's in the community center of
Yeah.
Lancaster. So making it accessible for, like, you know, someone on the street to come in and say, hey, I want to be a vendor, or hey, I want to like make products in this kitchen. Does that change a lot of the, like, the leaps and bounds that you go through to make that happen? Like, is it really just still updating our processes, or is it like making completely new things?
It's a good question. I don't know the answer. I think I'd have to look into that, because I don't know if how your license applies to others who might come in and use the space. Do they need some license as well
So in the
to,
past, no, we're the only permit holder.
yeah,
We're the only permit holder, and in the past, it's just been someone, like one of our farmers would come up and say, hey, I want to go and like do cut and kill squash. or
Yeah.
something, you know, and then we kind of supervise that. But now what we want to do is more people have permits so that they can just come and use the kitchen at will. That's
oh,
the
so yeah, if they have permits, I think again, if they're gonna,
that's something to get towards.
it probably, yeah, I'd have to look into it, but it probably would be that they'd have to get permits as well, because now they're becoming an operator, and the state's gonna make sure that they are fully aware of all the safety rules, and they're gonna operate in the same way that you do. And I don't know if it's enough that you oversee them, and that would be probably kind of burdensome for you guys to always have to
A
be
little bit,
there.
yeah.
And
But it makes sense to start getting people their own permits, like the one.
I think it's the safest, and it's probably what's gonna be required. Anything else? I guess we're pretty good. We have 20 minutes left, so I'll hang around, and if you guys want to keep walking around, you can find me later at the vendor table. So thank you. A lot of great questions. I really appreciate it.